So, welcome to my brown water. That is what these first videos are going to be. It's like when you haven't turned on an old faucet in a really long time and all this brown sputtering water comes shooting out. And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? That is these first videos. But I learned a lot on that last one. For example, don't bang on the table while the camera's on it. I mean, how annoying was that? I keep waiting to wake up in the morning and have a totally flipped perspective on this. Like, oh my God, what was I doing? What was I even thinking? But it hasn't happened yet. So, you know, it's like, I'm just up here. I'm just trying to talk about my art and share some perspectives. It's not like I'm up here shoving cucumbers up my ass and then one day I'm gonna realize I want to be a kindergarten teacher. So, I mean, how regretful could I really be? I want to tell you about a revelation that I had about the two types of breeds of people that exist, and those who are, whatever you want to call it, blessed, cursed, haunted by the persistent sense that there is something greater out there that they can never quite define. And I had this revelation while I was watching Ants. Not the movie, if there is a movie. It wasn't the movie. It was the real little critters. So let me give you some backstory. The house that I grew up in, I don't know how to describe it. Basically, okay, when the show Extreme Hoarders came out, I was like, oh, that is cute. That's cute. That's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. It was insanity. There were more than two, but there were two levels of insanity to the house. One was some of the furniture that was constructed. Like, my mom had built this incredible bed out of bamboo poles and twine and Christmas lights and all these layers of fringed fabric that hung down, and this like weird satin bolsters and ribbons. And as a child, it was magical. I don't know what I would think if I saw it through adult eyes, but you know, I try never to look through those eyes. So there was all that element of just very weird decor, pieces of trees, things that had no business being indoors, and very creative. But the other aspect of it was the piles, the extreme piles. And the house was like a black hole because she never really left the house. I mean, a little bit, but she didn't really bring things in, but there was just things in there that you could not explain how they got in there. I think they just got sucked into its whirling vortex. I don't know. But so sometimes the main areas were okay, you know, like it had the weird furniture thing going on, but it was relatively clear. But then there were other areas of the house that were like, holy shit. So, there were bedrooms that were locked, like not with regular like indoor locks like you put on a door if you don't want someone stealing your socks, or you know, you don't want someone catching you rubbing one out. These are like penitentiary locks, like when you do not want a pedophile in your schoolyard locks. So that was some of the bedrooms, but then and closets. There were closets in that house that I have never seen what's in them. I don't know. Like, she would go and she'd open them real quick and like dig and get stuff out and shut the door. I don't know. She was a mystery to me. I mean, I lived with her for 14 years, but I know very little about her. She's very mysterious. So another area was the basement, and that was more like, so there were different areas in the house depending on what feeling I felt like experiencing, that's where I would play and explore. Like there were some areas of these piles that would go up to the ceiling where you couldn't even see the walls. Like I couldn't tell you what the walls of these rooms looked like. Never seen the floor in them even. It was just, it was incredible. So some of these areas, like if you wanted to feel like that drugged sad feeling, like that dissociative grief, pain, sad feeling, you would go to this area. And then there were areas that for whatever reason, what was piled and the colors and the smells, I don't know, where it gave you a sense of comfort. And then there were areas where it was like a more adventurous sensation, and that was the basement. The basement was dark. The oil burner was down there, and this was a whole other level of hoarding because this stuff was like ancient, rotting. Also, there were dead animals that had died in there in the mix. It was like Indiana Jones kind of adrenaline feeling when you would go climbing in there. And it was like one of the dramas that I had to deal with as a kid was the fact that the oil burner was down there. If you're not familiar with the oil burner, I don't know if that's like a northern part of the country thing. This was New York. There's a huge tank and that feeds the oil burner, which there's like a fire in the bottom of it, which you can see. And my mom, she was always screaming about how there's so much stuff in the basement piled up around the oil burner that the whole house is gonna blow up. And so I lived with this continual sensation that my whole world just from underneath my feet was gonna blow apart into total smithereens, and we were gonna be launched into space, but not even as whole people, as little bits, fragments. So that was fun. But anyway, so one day, while exploring in the dark, fiery pits of the basement, I found a box for an ant farm. And it's still a mystery. There's a lot of mysteries that exist in my past that will remain unsolved, I guess. But this is really one of them, because there's this box for an ant farm, and there was no ant farm in it. And I want to know how that happened. I was the only child. There were no other kids in my family. She had cut herself off from our whole family. No one was coming in. Where was the ant farm? It drove me nuts, and I carried the box with me everywhere. It was like, like you buy you buy your cat all these toys and it just wants to play with the box. That was me, the child. But the ants on the cover, they were riding tractors, they were pulling radishes, they had chickens, like they were jamming, and I wanted in on the party. Anyhow, so it became one of my dreams in life to have an ant farm. And one day, a few years ago, it happened. It was a bit anticlimactic, however, due to the fact that the thing about farms is that they are sustainable. There is a life cycle going on. They regenerate themselves. This was more of like an ant containment unit, like put the ants in and watch them die. So from the beginning, it was a bit weird. So I mail away for my ants, which is weird. They come in the mail, little envelope, and I put them in my ant farm. And I was so ready. I had waited my whole life for this, and it was interesting what happened. So I would say that how many of, I don't know, 90%, maybe 95% of them exhibited expected ant behavior. They began to tunnel down, and they built all of these little tunnels and these networks, and so there probably weren't schools and churches and little farmers markets down there, but that's that's how I remember it, to be honest. But but anyway, so that was really cool. But then I started to notice, like wait a minute, what about these other guys? This little handful of guys up on the surface that they weren't tunneling and they were not participating in the whatever these other ants had going on. It was like they were communicating. They were transporting their waste. Some were dying. They were building a chamber for the dead. It was at that point that the ant farm got moved off the breakfast table. But oh, I'll tell you another time a story. Speaking of things that got moved off the breakfast table, about my fish named Sharknado. No. Sharktopus. He was amazing, but it gets a little sad there also. So these ants that are on the surface, they're kind of like huddled together, like they're a little club or something. And then within a few days, they started climbing on top of each other on the side of the little tank, the ant farm. And I'm like, what are these guys doing? You know, because they're like all stacked up. They're chewing the lid. They're chewing the fucking lid of the ant farm. And this just blew my mind. And so I started watching them, and so they would come down and they'd kind of like, it looked like they were having little meetings. And then eventually after a couple of days, they split into two groups, and there was one group chewing on one side and one group chewing on the other side. And I was looking, and they were actually making progress through this lid. And it was just incredible, because what did they know? What were they experiencing? What kind of feelings were they having that they had no interest in participating in typical unexpected ant behavior, but they had this sense of like the great beyond, the whole world. They knew there was something greater, and they were dedicating their lives to trying to access that. And I became so fascinated by this. And this kind of illustrated something for me. So it's always been a little bit of a, I don't know what the word is, not an issue, but like kind of a thing that I'm a little sore about, you know, that I've lived a very different life. I've made very different choices. There are times that I've tried to really fit in to the workings of society and do, you know, have a regular job and go to functions and have a routine and a schedule that lasted like 5 minutes. And I could never do it. And I just thought, like, there's something really, really wrong with me. And no matter where I lived in my life, not now that I live in LA, in California, but prior to that, my whole life, I've had this sense that there's something out there, like, and I had no words for it. It was just a feeling of like a being with no arms, no legs, no eyes, no mouth, no ability to communicate, that was just like, go, you know, trying to tell me to just keep going. And it didn't have language, so I couldn't communicate with it, but it was like it had all of this this force, and it lived within me, and it caused a lot of turmoil. And so I had left New York, where I grew up, and I was too scared to move to California, which was my dream, and I ended up in Florida and moved around down there. But no matter what relationship, no matter where I lived, there was always, no matter what I was doing, there was always this sense. And it was like these ants had the same sense. I felt like I found my people, and it was a little bit of a mind fuck that I found my people, like, that I could actually relate to, and they were fucking ants. But anyhow, so when I moved here, and this was 7 years ago, I walked away from my entire life, and I won't get into it, but some really horrible things happened. it was very my mom was dying, like all this stuff. It was a very, very difficult time. I was away from everyone that I knew. I knew no one here, and I gave up my business and my relationship and all of my friends, everything I'd ever known, everything I'd built in my life, to break through that lid. And I made quite a mess, quite frankly. So anywhere else in the world that I've been where there is a famous street, that's the nicest part of town. Well, not here. So I found this place. It was all I could afford. It was 265 square feet, and it was a block off Hollywood Boulevard, which I thought was amazing until I moved in there. And then, oh my God, I realized that there were days that I couldn't get out of the building because they had the police tape up, and there were like bodies under the tarp, and no, just all the crime. It's when people are talking about Hollywood, like in the rest of the country, they're not talking about Hollywood. They're talking about West Hollywood. Well, no one told me that. So, so all kinds of really, really difficult. I got jumped one time by these skinheads who like smushed Twinkies all over me. It was just embarrassing more than anything, because like they were at it for a little bit there. And then the worst part was, this is the worst part for me, was that they just left me there covered in Twinkies. I was like, you're just gonna leave me? Come back, you know. I bonded with my abusers. Anyway, so oh God. I told that story once to a friend of mine, and I forgot about it. And then she brought it up 5 years later, and I realized what an impression it made on people. And then it was very embarrassing. And I promised myself that I would never tell it again. Good job. Okay, so Hollywood Boulevard. Oh yeah. So my life, I walked away from everything. You know, like the world behind me was on fire, and I sailed my ship and landed here, and did not find what I expected to find, which was like, I had this sense of entitlement, I guess, where I had given up all these things to get on my path and pursue my dream. I expected it to be easy, you know, like arriving at the gates of Disneyland or something, and that was very much not the case. So, so life was just a crazy mess, and I was having this horrible anxiety. It was the worst it's ever been. And I found a hypnotherapist. She's incredible. If you live in the area, her name's Lisa Hubler. I don't know how you say it. It's mindmatters.com is her website. Anyway, so I went in to see her. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, let me see if I can say it as elegantly and poetically as her. What she said was that, all right, I'm going to paraphrase. Basically that, you know, animals travel thousands of miles because they have this deep inner knowing of where they need to go to get what they need to sustain their life. And I thought about that, and it just calmed down everything for me. I was like, yes, because the animals, whichever ones you want to pick out that are migrating, they can't possibly know. I mean, after a few years, yeah, but the first time, I'm saying, they can't possibly know what this calling is. All they know is that where they are is uncomfortable. It's not feeding them in the right way. You know, it's getting cold, and so they have this feeling like they should go, and they have a concept of this place that feels good and that has the nutrients and the nourishment that they need to live out the fullest version of their life. And I think that happens for people. We have that deeper knowing, and it's when your brain tries to, a lot of the trouble in life comes, I've noticed this, when you have a very deep knowing, and it's like from a down here place, because your gut is what's connected to the deeper intelligence of the whole universe. And it's when your mind tries to interpret that and put words to it, and to interpret it through the lens of your experiences and people's judgments and all of that. Often the mind's capability, because it's so limited in your knowledge, and because this knowledge is so expansive, they can't line up, and that discord creates incredible inner turmoil. And so in that moment, what she said to me, basically, what I took from it was that it's okay to not be able to see it, or to have language for it, or to explain it, or even have a clear picture of it. But if you have that knowing, that's enough, and you need to go with that and trust that it will be okay. And so the people that live their lives according to that, or have those very strong callings, I don't think everyone does, but the breed of person, or whatever you want to call it, who does, you guys, you are the lid chewers. And there's no condescension towards people that don't have those callings. I mean, we need those people to be able to live in our chaos, to have the luxury of chewing the lid. We need the grocery stores. We need freeways. We need insurance. Because it gets messy out there. But we have the luxury of being able to chew that lid and to pursue those feelings, because of the people that don't live that way, or don't have those feelings. So if you are a lid chewer like myself, be proud. You gotta like that about yourself. And keep trusting in that sense of something greater out there, because you might just know something that you don't know that you know. I just watched the whole first part of that video, and I realized that it does not make any sense to encourage people to be lid chewers and to chew the lid if that's who they feel that they are, and then tell horrifying stories of what happens when you get outside the lid. The ants, by the way, were freed. What was interesting though was the ants that were down beneath, they were dying, and the ants on the top, they didn't die. It was weird. So they did make it out, thanks to a little help from me, which was interesting, because I would never have let the ants out of that little containment unit. But I was so touched by their, just by their spirit and their drive, and it moved me. I saw them, and I let them go. But so that was just a transition period. That was retarded. This whole video, chew the lid, and then, but horrible thing, you'll get beaten with Twinkies. What I think happens sometimes is that there's a greater version of yourself, and this is why bad things happen. Sometimes there's this version of yourself, and then there's you, and you're not quite in alignment with that, and so you have to go through things sometimes that kind of break you open and create all of these inner shifts, and actually change your energy, so that you become more a match, more in alignment with that vision of yourself. So I think what happened was, I had chewed through the lid and escaped into the great beyond, which is where I sensed that I always needed to be, and I was so right. I mean, just being here, the way after that rough patch, the way that my life's unfolded has been truly things have happened that I can only describe as magic, really. But I think that's what that beginning stuff was all about. It was like clearing things out in me and calling things up that I needed to address within myself, so that I could actually be that picture, be that person that was in that sense of the picture of that greater knowing and that sense of my life, that I held onto for so many years. I hope that makes better sense. Like I said in the beginning, this is my brown water. I'm doing my best. This is the first time in my life that I've ever been able to sit in front of a camera and not go into total blackout amygdala hijack. So I'm getting it. I'm getting better. Thank you for watching.